Hello, happy Wednesday evening, Penguins fans. July 20th. We get closer to the month of August, or as everyone likes to say, the dog days of summer are almost upon us. For today's show, I'm going to go into a potential left winger option for Evgeny Malkin, since I have been told that that's what the team is looking to potentially do to make the forward group a bit deeper. Also, talk about a potential, I shouldn't say potential, but the thought of maybe a homecoming with a certain player who is a free agent still. Not really sure when he's going to sign, but he is out there, and he was asked about in Josh Yohe's mailbag. So I'm going to get into that and a couple of other things, especially the whole Matthew Tkachuk rumors. I know I did a segment last night saying how it would be very unlikely for the Penguins to get him, but I'm going to go into just the teams that I think make sense for him, and just I think the parts that I would be willing to part if the Penguins were to somehow be interested. So a little bit different from the segment I ran on my Tuesday episode. So that's all coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. So a couple things before I really get into the meat of this show. First off, I apologize to everyone when I mispronounced Ryan Poehling's name. There it is. I've been doing this show for almost 3 years now. It is not often I mispronounce someone's last name. And believe me, I've had my last name mispronounced way too many times. Hooties, Hotties, Huddies. I feel really bad that I did that. It's embarrassing that I honestly mispronounced Ryan Poehling's last name. But, thanks to the listeners who commented on the YouTube channel, and of course to Ryan Mill, who gave out all the pronunciations for the new Penguin players that have been acquired over the last week or 2 weeks. It is Ryan Poehling. Wanted to get that out of the way. I feel really bad. Ryan, if you ever listen to this podcast, I will never butcher your name again. So it's my fault. I think that's the first name I butchered since I somehow mispronounced Louis Demey's name. No, I'm for those that were not listening, I believe this was like last September. I said his last name so it was like I think I said like Domingue or something, and I'm like, yeah, that's not right. So again, very rare that I do that, but want to take a couple minutes here to apologize for that. Also wanted to say, if anyone is going to be at the Penguins Toronto Maple Leafs game on November 15th of this year, I will be there. This will be the first time I think I'll be at PPG since I really started this podcast, to be honest. I mean, I think last time I was there, I think I was maybe 2 to 3 months into doing the show. So, it wasn't really well known yet, but this is really, basically the first time that when the show's a lot bigger now that I will be back in Pittsburgh for a game. So if you are thinking of going to that game, let me know. We can meet up, just talk Penguins and all that stuff. I'd love to meet as many listeners as I can, as long as I do the show. I believe I'm going to be going to the game on March 11th against the Flyers at PPG. Shout out to you, Ricky. I think I'm going to be going with him, a longtime listener of the show. I'm very excited to do that. So, Ricky, I'm sure you're going to listen to this episode. Definitely excited to go with you for that game. So, I wanted to get those couple of things out of the way before I get into the meat of this episode. But okay, let's get into the first topic here, and that is, that potential left winger for Evgeny Malkin, because the St. Louis Blues might be making some big changes here. For those that don't know, they've been heavily linked to Matthew Tkachuk, Jeremy Rutherford, and Haley Salvin of The Athletic today. They both reported that it's looking likely that Tkachuk is going to get dealt. I think JP Rutherford, that is, and Haley, they both listed 7 teams that he would like to be traded to or sign an extension with. Believe a few of them, obviously St. Louis, Florida, Las Vegas, Dallas, Nashville, think a couple others. Basically, teams that, they're in states with no income tax. For the Blues, that's a homecoming there. And I think they have the pieces to do it. They can give up like a first and their second round pick, Jordan Kyrou, maybe, maybe Torrey Krug, Marco Scandella, maybe Vladimir Tarasenko. But I don't really know if he would go back in that deal. But, that is the player that I would kind of be looking at here if I were the Penguins. If you actually want to make a big splash, and yes, I know what his cap hit is for this 1 year, $7.5 million. You would have to be dumping out a lot of salary just to bring him in. Right now, if the Penguins, I believe they have $1 to $2 million in cap space. So, I think, someone like Marcus Pettersson would have to be going out. Maybe Brock McGinn. Maybe Jason Zucker or something like that. They would have to move one of those $4 to $5 million contracts and then create a little bit more cap room and a potential other salary dump. But teams, they finagle with the cap all the freaking time. So, I think he is definitely within. He's more in their asking price range than someone like, Tkachuk is. And, going into this season, he was still a very good player. 85th percentile in wins above replacement per JFresh's model, 90th percentile in finishing, 72nd percentile in power play, even strength offense about 50-50, but it went up a lot this year. Quality of teammate, 95 percentile, is able to draw a lot of penalties, which is also great. And then, this year he had one heck of a season. He didn't really play that much last year. Comes back this year, 34 goals, 82 points in 75 games. And, you wouldn't know if he asked for a trade last year. The Blues, they got pretty lucky that Tarasenko came back and played like this because, remember, he was exposed in the expansion draft last summer in Seattle. They easily could have taken a flyer on him, but Ron Francis kind of screwed that up, and the Blues, that I said thank you very much, we'll keep him. And he was great. Played in 75 games this year. Before that, he only played 34 games in the last 2 seasons combined before this one. That's how banged up he had been. But, usually when he's healthy, he's one of the top 5 to 10 best pure goal scorers, I think, in this league. The underlying numbers this year, when he was on the ice, the Blues only had 46% of the scoring chances. It's a little bit down from where he was, even in 2019-20, but 55% of the actual goals scored for St. Louis. 46% of the scoring chances. He's never really been that good defensively, but high danger goals for 57% of those. High danger chances though for 45%. So those numbers aren't super good, but I feel like he would be a very good fit on Evgeny Malkin's line. It would also finally end, that Russian for Geno kind of thing. Remember back in the day, I'm sure some people, you all remember this. The Penguins were going after, I believe it was like Nikolai Kulemin. That's a throwback name, I'm sure, for some of you all. And everyone just kept saying Russian winger for Geno. This is the one. And then it ended up not happening. I think something fell through with that. And so that this would finally bring an end, to that kind of talk. But, it would also just, it would make the team, more of a contender, but it would also strengthen, Malkin's line. It would probably give him arguably the best winger he's ever played with. James Neal was awesome for a couple years. Actually, no, this probably would be the best winger that he's ever played with now that I think about it for like 5 seconds. James Neal was great for a couple years, scored 40 goals on his line. But this is Vladimir Tarasenko here, for God's sake. He is a very, very good player. And, if you think about a top 6 of Jake Guentzel, Sidney Crosby, Brian Rust, Vladimir Tarasenko, Evgeny Malkin, and Rickard Rakell, and you potentially, if Zucker is still there, he slide down to the third line with Jeff Carter and someone else. But if he's not, you still can, you can still, I guess, have options in your bottom 6. Even if Zucker is not there, maybe you could still sign someone if you have a little bit more cap room left over, even though, again, it is $7.5 million, but also, which is nice, you could potentially ask St. Louis to retain a little bit of that salary. Say, they want to retain 50% of that. Excuse me. That's what, 3.75. Yeah, 3.75. So, the Penguins, they can make that work. at least a little bit. Maybe St. Louis doesn't retain 50, but maybe it's like 33%, and the number goes down to 5.5, 6 or something. That would also help the Penguins a lot. And say Zucker is so on the team, you can bump him down to the third line, and in an instant, the team becomes even deeper. So yeah, the bottom six still needs some work, but excuse me, if you can get that pure top six sniper to put with Evgeny Malkin and Rickard Rakell, man, all of a sudden that team starts looking a lot different. And I think Tarasenko, I think that trade request is still up. I don't think he's rescinded it. At least from what I've been able to gauge on it, and from what I've been able to read from Jeremy Rutherford, I think from The Athletic, who does a great job covering the St. Louis Blues. I think that is still out there. So, that's an option that I think could definitely work for the Penguins. I think they would have they would definitely have the assets to maybe do this one over someone like Matthew Tkachuk, even though, I would move almost anyone on this team to get him, even though the Penguins, obviously, they're not going to do that. That's not how Ron Hextall is going to operate here. But, I was brought to, the attention of Tarasenko by one of my mutuals. And, the more I looked into it, the more it did make sense. It can also put him on a power play. Say if one of the big guns gets hurt, or maybe if Brian Rust wants to come off the top unit. Say you have a power play of Tarasenko, Malkin, Crosby, Letang, and Gensel. Whoo! Good luck to anyone stopping that. Seriously. That's beautiful right there. And again, I do think his underlying numbers would go up big time with that kind of acquisition. So that wraps up this first segment of today's episode. Coming up in the next segment, we're going to get into a potential potential homecoming, and if that would work, would I be a fan of the Penguins going after this player after seeing it in Josh Yohe's mailbag? And then we'll get to a couple other things to end the show. But before I get to that, BetOnline.net is the fastest and easiest way to check on all of your betting needs. You can find all of your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. You can find reviews and news of every league, including the MLB, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. It continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They all have you covered. You head to the website today or to use your phone to learn more about the trends in action. That is BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, I'm back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. I don't know what is going on. I don't know why this cough is just killing me. So earlier today, I was reading Josh Yohe's mailbag, and for those that did not read it, go check it out. Some good info in there. And, my scoop was verified, at least by him. He was not obviously the person that told me that the Penguins included Marcus Pettersson in the original offer for Jeff Petrie, but he had also heard the same thing. So check mark for me on that one. I will gladly take the W with that. So, I like to gas myself up a little bit sometimes, even though, again, I'm not Elliot Friedman over here. I'm not breaking trades left and right. When I hear something from someone that I very much trust, that I know is around the team a lot more than me, I pass it along because, that this person has never failed me in the past. Now, let's get to this player that was talked about in Josh Yohe's mailbag, and it was the man, the myth, the legend, Phil the Thrill Kessel. Someone asked Mr. Yohe, what are the Penguins going to bring him back? And, he had a funny answer about it. If I can load it up here on the mailbag. Nope, that is not what I want, because that was about Matthew Tkachuk. And I'm trying to find this here. No. Everyone's asking about JT Miller. Yeah, there it is. Josh basically asked, does Phil have anything left in the tank? I saw him play twice in person, and I thought he looked awful physically speaking. His shot has lost a lot of velocity. He's also an average skater now. That burst that made him unique is a thing of the past. And then he was asked, will the Penguins sign Kessel? And Josh goes, I would love to tell you yes. Under no circumstances, though, do I see this happening. He is a right wing. The Penguins already have Rust and Rakell. Do you see Kessel fitting into a third line? And before anyone says the HBK line worked, yeah, I know it did, but he doesn't also have Nick Bonino and Carl Hagelin on this team. He will be saddled right next to Jeff Carter. And I'm not really sure how Mike Sullivan would feel about that, considering, there's all these rumors that him and Kessel do not really have the best of relationships. But, you look at the underlying numbers this past season, you go on actual stat trick, 5v5, 5 goals, 33 points at even strength, and, only 5 even strength goals in 82 games. Like, that's not Phil. This is, 2 of his last 3 seasons that he's scored under 10 goals at 5v5. The underlying numbers this year, when he was on the ice, the Coyotes only had 44% of the shot attempts. This is now the 4th straight season in 5 of his last 6 that he's been under 50% in terms of course, the goals for percentage, 42%. That's one of the worst marks of his career. Only 42% of the scoring chances at even strength, 41% of the high danger chances, and then only 43% of the high danger actual goals for. Yeah, I know the numbers aren't that good, but even going back to his last year in Pittsburgh, he was definitely starting to fall off a little bit. And I know Jim Rutherford did not do a lot of good towards the end of his tenure with the Penguins, but I do think he picked the right time to trade Phil because that decline came really steep for him. Sure, could you get him for, I guess, a cheap deal on the open market? Yeah, and he is basically a folk hero in this city. I think a lot of fans would love to see him come back just because of what he did, the history and all that stuff. But in terms of how he is as a hockey player at this point, I hate to say it, but he's kind of washed at this point. He's not all the way there yet, but you can definitely see that the decline is in full motion with Kessel. And I'm not really sure how much of a fan he'd be playing on the 3rd or 4th line with the Penguins. I think he wants to go somewhere where he can be on someone's second line. I think Jeff Merrick on the last 32 Thoughts episode was talking about how he could see the Predators potentially signing him, and I think that would make sense. Nashville, they're not super deep out forward, but I think he could potentially play on their second line or something like that. But again, it would be fun, to get some of the band a little bit back together. But in terms of, do I think this makes the Penguins a bit better of a team with him on the ice? I don't see it. His defensive game has always been bad. It's gotten way worse as he's gotten older. And again, when he's not scoring at this point, he's not really doing too much. He's always been an underrated playmaker, but even that part of his game has declined. Only 28 even strength assists, last season in Arizona. Sure, he'll want to go to a contender, but with the Penguins basically loaded up on their right wings on the top 2 lines. Sorry about that. I had to take a sip of my water. My mouth is going dry. With the Penguins loaded up with Rust and Raquel on their top 2 lines, and I'm sure Kasperi Kapanen is going to come back. I just don't really see the fit there for me, at least. Again, it'll be awesome, be fun, especially just, the fan in me, of course, since I loved watching him, back when I was a senior in high school and, freshman, sophomore in college, all that stuff. But, the objective analyst in me says, no, move on. You can try to find someone else that, I think can score a little bit more for my liking. So that wraps up this short little second segment for today's show. Again, coming up in the 3rd segment, we're going to get into some more about Matthew Tkachuk and, where I think this is going to end up. And, if I was able to think about it over, what I would potentially move if I were the Penguins and I were looking into him. So that's all coming up right after this commercial break. All right, I'm back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter, Hunter Hodes. You can also follow the show's Twitter at @L_Penguins. So, I think that this is going to be, quite the circus these next few days, week, 2 weeks. Tkachuk, this is the next domino to fall, and I feel so bad for Flames fans. For everyone that listens to the show, I don't talk a lot about the Flames, obviously. If you want to learn more about the Flames, go check out Jess Belmosto of Locked On Flames. She does an excellent job talking about that team on a daily basis. And the funny thing is, she doesn't even root for that team, yet she still knows them a hell of a lot better than I do. That's for damn sure. But they're going to be losing 2 100-point players, it looks like, during this offseason. It's terrible. And for Tkachuk, it makes all the sense in the world for him to go home to St. Louis But, if the Penguins were to get involved somehow, some way, and yes, as I said on my Tuesday episode, would he be a great fit here? Duh. Abso-freaking-lutely. Is the Pope Catholic here, people? For those that, for those that are Catholics that listen to my show, I mean, I'm Jewish, but that's a whole different story here. Anyways, I don't know why I got sidetracked. But yes, duh. He has everything that the Penguins would want in a top six winger: the size, the tenacity, the physicalness, the goal scoring, the playmaking, the defensive play, everything you want in a top six winger. He brings to your team and then some. He had over 100 points last season. Could you imagine seeing him and Tom Wilson going at it, Penguins Caps games? That would be something else. And in terms of what I would give up if I were the Penguins, they are not going to do this, and I totally get that. I'm not, I would give up anyone that is not named Sidney Crosby, Jake Gensel, Evgeny Malkin, and Chris Letang. Everyone else would be on the table in that trade for Matthew Tkachuk. Dead serious. Maybe Tristan Jarry, because there's no goaltenders available right now. So I would put Tristan Jarry on there. Other than those five players, anyone is on the table. Maybe Jeff Petrie, since you just acquired him, but I'm honestly splitting hairs at that point. Anyone basically should be on the table outside of those 4 to 5 core players. He is that good. He's a difference maker. He would push the Penguins over the top. He would be just an absolute blast to watch. Could you imagine him on the line with Evgeny Malkin and Rickard Rakell, or up top with Jake Gensel and Sid? I mean, good Lord. I mean, it's just good luck stopping the Penguins with that. And yeah, will the Penguins inquire about Tkachuk? Absolutely. If you are a team out there and you are not calling Brad Treliving's phone to at least ask what the price is, you should not be a general manager. That's how I feel about it. I mean, Ron Hextall, I'm sure he gave him a call and said, hey, we're not fully interested, but what's the price for him? Maybe they gave him the price. He's like, okay, thank you, we're not interested, and hung up. But at least you're asking around to hear about it, and to see if it's somehow in your wheelhouse, even though it's probably not. But I think the Penguins, they should at least try to, if they haven't already, to inquire with that. So again, maybe it's, I don't know, your first or second round pick. I hate saying this, Brian Rust, and one of your goaltending prospects, or even Owen Pickering. It's probably worth it because of Tkachuk himself. I know you just signed Brian Rust to an extension, but it's Matthew freaking Tkachuk here, man. I mean, he is that freaking good. And, there's always the possibility that, a team like Calgary, they could bungle that trade. I mean, the Jack Eichel trade, sure, Buffalo got Alex Tuch and Peyton Krebs, who I think could be decent players, but, they're not Jack Eichel. I mean, Alex DeBrincat just went from Chicago to Ottawa, and they got the number 7 overall pick? And that's okay. I mean, you're not really, that pick is still basically, I know, outside of, I guess, the top 3 to 4 picks, everything after that is almost like an unknown for me. So, you're basically just trading some magic beans, for a really freaking good player in DeBrincat. So, these star trades tend to get bungled all the time. But, I can definitely see St. Louis in it. Nashville does make sense if they want a bona fide top line winger. Dallas pairing him with Jason Robertson and Rupe Hintz would be nasty. Ooh, man, I was just thinking about that. That's just, the old guys get old with Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin, but then the young guys, they keep stepping up. And the Tkachuk, he's 23, 24 in the prime of his career. I mean, just think about that, man. I mean, I would absolutely love if the Penguins could somehow get their hands on him. And again, I know it's not going to happen, but 4 to 5 players I would keep. Anyone else, I think, for me, would be on the table. Last thing real quickly, I have been getting some texts from some of my buddies, and I want to talk about this on the show. And, people are trying to argue that, Matheson was just as good as Jeff Petrie, or he's a bit better. I don't know what people are watching, but Jeff Petrie is a better player than Mike Matheson. Petrie had 21 points in his final 30 games with Marty St. Louis. He was a legitimately great player last year. Matheson had a great year, but again, these people my friends that keep texting me, you don't know if he's going to continue to play like that on a much worse team. Montreal is going to probably be a lottery team again next year. Penguins, they're still a bona fide playoff team. Maybe they're not a contender right now, but they are still very much a playoff freaking team. And he's going to be playing on a pairing, it looks like right now, with Marcus Pettersson, someone who is very defensively responsible. And he's also probably going to get a lot of minutes with Evgeny Malkin, and that's going to benefit both of them. I would, be more than happy to make a wager with some of these people where I would predict that Petrie gets more points next year than Matheson, despite being a hell of a lot older than him. This is a legitimately great player. And the fact that the Penguins have a 1-2 punch of Letang to Petrie, because Petrie would be a lot of teams, number 2 guy at least, number 1, the fact that, he's basically their number 3, I would say at this point, total, because Dumoulin's on the top pairing, so I automatically give him the number 2 spot. That's just great value for the Penguins. So I wanted to end the show with that. Again, just look at Petrie's underlyings too, his finishing ability, all that good stuff. But I will be back with another episode for you all on Thursday. It's not going to be from this house, so I am heading to the beach this weekend. I need a vacation. I'm heading to the beach again for a full week next Friday. I have not gone on many vacations this summer, but I'm definitely excited to head to a couple of different beaches over these next couple of weeks. I definitely, need a break, or, need a vacation, I think is the way I'm to say. And I love going to the beach. So it's going to look a little bit different when I'm recording from a hotel room starting tomorrow and Friday. And then next week, I will be recording mostly from here. And then the week after that, I will be at my girlfriend's mom's house, because we're going down to the Outer Banks where her mom lives and bringing them the puppies. So that'll do it for this episode. Again, thank you all so much for listening. I'll be back on Thursday. Hope you all have a great rest of your night.